Next up is a panel on the cannabis industry's path to success through key ancillary businesses. This one should be fun. And here to lead the panel for us is Jeremy Burke, senior reporter over at Insider. What's happening, man? You all right?
I'm doing pretty well, Patrick. How about you?
Always good, man. Always good. It's good to see you again. As we get some of our
likewise.
friends on here, I'll let you introduce them. Some we've seen already, and some we'll see again shortly. So all you.
Sure. I will take it away from here. So welcome, everybody. We are talking about, as Patrick said, the cannabis industry's path to success through ancillary companies. I report on this industry every single day. There is a lot of attention paid on the cultivators, on the brands, but there is somewhat less attention, both through my own fault in the media, as well as in terms of investors and all of that on ancillary companies. And the way I like to think about ancillary companies, and as many of you do, is picks and shovels, right? It's not those who are digging for gold who made the most money, but it's those who are selling the picks, the shovels, the sieves, whatever that may be. And so I'd love to get into all that, talk about the ancillary industry, growth plans, as well as how kind of policy changes are affecting those of you on the panels who are sort of running these companies and trying to figure out where to drive the business next. So with that, I'll kick it over to you guys for intros. And Raymond, you are right below me, so I will let you take the lucky number one.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be on the panel today. Raymond Chang, Agrify Chairman and CEO. So we just went public earlier this year. So who we are is, our intention is to basically help pepsify the industry. And what I mean by that is I truly believe that the industry is moving towards a CPG-like quality where consistency and quality really matter. Our vertical farming solution is unique in the sense that it's fully integrated solutions and where we can actually provide the most precise growing environment to the plants to help our customers to essentially produce the highest consistency and quality at all times. Thank you.
Great. Bradley, let's go to you next.
Perfect. Hi. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I'm Bradley Nattrass, Chairman and CEO of Urban Grow, a horticulture company that engineers, designs, and integrates complex environmental equipment systems into custom controlled environment ag facilities. We also have an emerging managed services division that's focused on utilizing our expertise to work side by side with our clients to optimize their facilities once they're up and running and operational. We're based in Lafayette, Colorado, right in between Boulder and Denver. We're in our 8th year. We have 51 employees, of which 2/3 are experts, professional engineers, agricultural engineers, mechanical, controls, electrical, et cetera. Overall, a group of individuals who have a great deal of experience growing multiple crops. It's this experience and the more than 300 facilities that we've worked on that attracts clients to Urban Grow. We ensure that our clients' environment is carefully and perfectly controlled so they can focus on what they're best at, and that's growing plants and growing profit. We trade on the NASDAQ exchange under the symbol UGRO. I put it under right beside my name as well, and operate on a global footprint. Personally, I have an MBA. I have close to 20 years in the ag industry. And at Urban Grow, I focus on corporate strategy, biz dev, investor relations, and of course, overall profitability and growth.
I'm David Cohen. I'm the CEO of Fluence Bioengineering. Fluence is based in Austin, Texas, and we are the global leader in LED lighting for cannabis. And we also have a large part of our business dedicated to commercial agriculture, vertical farms, and vegetable growing. I've been at the company since 2018 when the original founders of the business sold it to Osram. And I've been in charge and driving global growth at almost a dangerous pace, we like to say, everywhere in the world. We went from a small footprint of maybe 50 people in Austin, Texas in 2018 to now well over 200 people around the world. We have a pretty big team in Europe, based in the Netherlands, and we have a team in Asia Pacific. We really focus on the science of what's happening with lighting and what we can do with different light recipes to help our customers grow smarter. I've been personally in LED lighting for roughly 24, 25 years. I've lived around the world. I did a couple of years in Asia, 5 or 6 years in Europe, running different companies. But this is the most fantastic ride that I've ever been on. The ancillary space is really important, and I would echo what Brad said. This is just a great opportunity to talk about some of the things that our collective businesses are doing to help growers. They are being bombarded with just an enormous amount of information, and going from, likely a very small setup with the initial grower into something very significant, you need a lot of expertise. And I believe that all of our companies here are providing key inputs to some of these growers to help them understand what they need to do to be successful. So just thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the dialogue.
Yeah, thanks, David. And last but not least, Nick, please.
Nick Tennant here. Thanks for everyone for having me. I'm the founder and chief technology officer of Precision Extraction Solutions, and Precision is an end-to-end solutions provider for all things processing. So you can essentially come to us with a pile of dirt. Obviously, we have the engineering and design services. We have partnered construction firms that can actually build the physical infrastructure, but we're also a designer and manufacturer of equipment. So these processes needed to take the cannabis plant or the hemp plant into a refined oil, into an edible, into a vape pen. Every single process in that realm, we can provide a solution for. Not only can we provide the equipment solution for it, but we can also train your staff, integrate the SOPs, do some of the services downstream, such as efficiencies and managed services and recurring technological assessments, to ensure that a client's production line for their products is meeting their expectations for quality, consistency, throughput, and it's really led us to become the clear leader in the space. So as of today, we're about 55 employees. We established the company in 2012, and we've grown it ever since. And along that path, we've picked up probably the best client list in the entire industry. If you look at any MSO, any publicly traded company, I think we've got like 95% of them as our clients today. So one of the ways that we really focus on managing our client relationships is just through understanding, through intimacy, through really being face-to-face as much as we can with our clients, being in their labs, understanding their hurdles, and using that positive feedback loop of information to grow our business. And it's been extremely successful for us to the day, and we're doing very well.
Appreciate that. So I think one thing to kind of set the stage for viewers here is that when we talk about ancillary cannabis, we're not really talking about one thing. We have, LED lighting expertise, extraction, and all the kind of, full suite cultivation equipment that you need. So it's actually a pretty broad spectrum of products here and systems here that we're discussing. So, with that, I think I'll go to Bradley first here. Part of what we talked about in our prep call the other day is like, why is the industry not talking enough about ancillary cannabis companies? And how do you kind of change that? And Bradley, I'll start with you, and anyone who wants to chime in, please just go ahead. Feel free to jump right in.
Perfect. You bet, Jeremy. So I'd say in the past, the drive has been the true appeal of the plant itself, and sort of the cool factor as legalization started to take place in other countries like Canada and as it swept across the US. But the industry has matured. It started to mature, in my opinion, back in the later part of 2019 with the focus on profitability. That was the first indicator for me. But now with acquisitions, like Fluence was acquired by the global giant Osram a couple of years ago, German-based Osram. And, you look at the uplisting of companies like Raymond's Agrify and Urban Grow. The industry is now just beginning to talk more about companies like all of ours. And as I started in my introduction, being invited to be a part of an ancillary panel at a key time of day like this, this is a great indicator of this momentum happening real time.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Brad. I mean, initially it's where all the flash is, right? The money starts to come in, and the allure of cannabis legalization would naturally focus on the bigger players, and then there was a number of pretty large acquisitions and takeovers, a lot of speculation about big tobacco coming in or beverage companies. But at the end of the day, all of these people have to do the same thing. They have to bring up a very complicated ecosystem. They have to be able to grow plants and manage something at scale where, in all likelihood, they've never had to at the size and the scale that they're doing it. And that puts a lot of spotlight on the ecosystem partners, because all of us coming in, we're bringing a perspective. Oftentimes what we find is these growers know what they know, but in our case at least, and I know in Brad's case, because we work very closely with Urban Grow, we're in over 500 grows around the world. So we like to think that we've seen a lot of these mistakes that people are about to make, and we try as hard as we can to help, but also be very, very respectful that everybody's on their own journey. And all you can really do is try to help and guide and bring knowledge to the table. But I think it's just a great time now that, things are really starting to ramp up and legalize. You have so many of these grows coming up everywhere. It just opens up the door to look at the ecosystem and how it's going to be able to support the business.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead, Nick, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So from my standpoint, I mean, you have these layers of infrastructure, right? And obviously the base layer of infrastructure is always growing the plant, which the gentlemen on the panel obviously understand exactly what's going on and how that infrastructure intertwines with the success of these business. In the intermediary, we have our business, which is processing. And when you think about processing, you have to understand that 50% of the retail sales on any given shelf or any given dispensary as an average are extracted products. So this cannabis or this hemp that's grown needs to be processed and needs to go through an infrastructure layer that Precision is providing. And because of that, we continue to grow our client base. We continue to grow our infrastructure. We continue to grow the number of installs, which is well above 1,000 at this point. But all of these companies, the theme is they're going to need this underlying infrastructure. As Brad and David said, they're going to need these vendor partners that help them build this infrastructure. They help them build this tribal knowledge. These companies are growing at rapid rates. And to grow at these rates, right, they have to bring people on. They have to train people. They have to disseminate that tribal knowledge through their entire staff. And they need the infrastructure partners in order to do that, whether it's growing or processing. It's going to be a key integral part of their go forward plan. And then the other part that I would say is that, this infrastructure always needs maintenance, right? There's this recurring stream of revenue, this recurring stream of money that's coming into these ancillary businesses such as ours, because these are long-standing relationships that we're developing. Not only are we capitalizing on the growth of our clients, but we're capitalizing on the long-term relationships, in that the fact that they just really need the resources long-term as they're turning over staff, as they're replacing equipment, as they're maintaining equipment. All these things need to be accounted for in order for them to have a successful business.
Yeah. Raymond, would you like to weigh in on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, no, absolutely. I think in the early days, really, you only have to just kind of grow it, and basically, there's not that much of a kind of a requirement for consistency and quality, but consumer taste is changing. The industry is becoming more and more mainstream. And I really believe that the industry is moving toward a more CPG-like quality, where consistency and quality are just so important. And people realize that actually growing cannabis is not easy. It's a very, very complex plant, right? Maybe 50% of it is determined by the genetics, but the reality is that if you don't actually have a controlled environment, you're bound to have so much volatility. And that's one of the reasons why in the industry today, we're seeing a lot of repeat customer, but very rarely what we call 3P customers, because consumers, they try something they like for the first time, they love it, they come back for the second time, and it tastes completely different. And guess what? They switch, right? So having the ability to help our customers to produce good quality cannabis flowers consistently is where the industry is going. I firmly believe in that.
Yeah. I think one of the points that Raymond, David, and you all are sort of getting at is that, growing quality cannabis that's consistent is actually very difficult. I think a lot of lay people may think, you buy a greenhouse, you throw a couple seeds in soil, and all of a sudden you're profiting. But it's actually a lot more complex than that. So, what makes growing cannabis different than growing tomatoes? And whether that's the regulations or, as Raymond said, the control factors and the genetics that go into it, like, what are all the difficulties that cannabis presents that most other crops don't? And whoever wants to start with that can go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one if that's all right. Go first.
Sure.
What we found, when I first got there in 2018, I still had a lot to learn, cut my teeth on figuring out what's going on in the industry. So I went out to a lot of these grows and visited a lot of customers around the world. By and large, what we found is that you've got really, really great growers, but the scale that they're used to operating at is so small. And they've gone through, I'm just pick a number here, they're 10 plants or 50 plants in a very small controlled area. They've gone through all the learning. I'm sure initially when they started, there was trials and tribulations and ups and downs. But when you put this thing in a big, huge facility with open space, and you have to control humidity, you have to control temperature, you have to control all these variables at such a larger scale than you were used to dealing with, you got to relearn how to do it all over again. And what we found is that participating in that journey with these customers just gives us a lot of insight into what works and what doesn't work, and then we can, potentially bring that to the next customer. So I would have to say, in a very general sense, but the challenge is scale. To take something that worked at small scale, and then suddenly you have tens of millions of dollars, or potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of capital deployed. You're buying some really expensive stuff. You're hiring people. And the amount of grows that myself and my team have been in that have a significant quantity of the plants either not thriving or actually in a lot of trouble was really surprising to me. And those questions were, what I asked, what's going on? And they said, look, we got to learn how to do this all over again. I was good at, 50 plants, but now it's 3,000 plants. It's a very, very different situation, at least from my experience.
Yeah. And I'll add on to that. David, it's scale, which really ties into controlling the environment. You heard Raymond talk about it. You heard me talk about it a little bit earlier. There's so many factors to consider. The facility needs to be designed holistically, taking all of those different pieces of equipment into consideration, because you could have a phenomenal facility, but when you turn it on and start operating, and if everything's not working well together, you'll have a pest outbreak in that facility, whether it be it's too humid and you have powdery mildew or different types of insects. And that's usually the two biggest issues that we run into to help clients solve are pest outbreaks. And the second is underspecified mechanical or cooling in the facility.
Yeah. I think cannabis is a really complex plant, as we know, right? As hundreds of chemical cannabinoids inside of that flower. Now, this is actually what's very interesting. We believe that 50% of it is probably determined by the genetic, right? But the remainder 50% is really the nurturing aspect, which is the entire grow environment. You can actually basically cut, the same mother plant, mother stock, and then if you actually put in two different environments, the outcome will be completely different, right? So, our solution, first of all, we essentially determine what we call the strain-specific grow plan. Like, I'll just give you one example, like purple punch. We now know that on day 57, like for example, you want to intensify the red light spectrum because that's what gives the nice purple color at the end. Now, if you're going to grow another strain called lemon haze, right? Maybe you want to basically have a different temperature and humidity setting because, again, you wanted to push out different chemical, profile of the flower, right? So, the best is actually to determine what we call a genetic specific grow plan. And once you figure that out, the next challenge is how do you repeat that same process over and over again, right? So our solution basically records data on a minute-by-minute basis, right? So we know exactly, where the temperature is at, humidity, even fertigation, irrigation cycle, even as much as airflow, right? Doing that 2 meters per second versus 4 meters per second will have very different results, right? So being able to basically figure out how to optimize, strain by strain, and being able to repeat that same process over and over, I think is really kind of the key to producing the best consistency and quality at the end of the day.
And so the idea here, Raymond, just to kind of drill into that, is not necessarily that it's difficult to grow one cannabis plant, but that to make something repeatable and CPG-like, as you said in your words, like that is the difficulty, and that's the challenge here. Is that a fair characterization?
No, you're absolutely correct, right? Because right now, if you can go into any of the facilities today, and what you realize is that people are just kind of doing an average reading, right? You have basically a room, typically a few hundred, if not 1,000 square feet, right? So you can imagine there are different environmental pockets inside of that facility, right? One corner would definitely have the temperature humidity setting from another, right? But right now, everybody's just kind of, we're just kind of do an average for all, right? I don't believe in that. What we believe is that we need to actually bring it down to the plant level, right? To be able to provide what we call precision grow to every single plant, right? So it's really a huge challenge. I know, for example, a lot of people have tried to, for example, go vertical. We're not the first company actually to, consider that, because obviously a tremendous wastage of real estate, right? But the thing is this: once you go vertical, you're going to have stratification in that room. Temperature, humidity are not going to be set the same upper floor versus lower floor, right? Then how do you manage that? Right? And also, how do you provide a safe and comfortable working environment for the workers so that you have the same productivity? Doesn't matter if you're upper floor or on the lower floor, right? So these are all the challenges that basically we have to look at. And that's the reason why we take a very integrated approach, because we built the solution holistically from the ground up to address all these problems that the industry is facing today.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Maybe Bradley, if I could turn to you next. I mean, do you see some similar challenges like that, based on the clients you work or the greenhouses you work with? And if so, is there anything else that, are particularly special challenges that you deal with on a day-to-day basis?
We're working with clients really across North America and in Europe. The clients, every facility that they have and build is a snowflake. The facilities we've worked on are from 20,000 square feet to 800,000 square feet. So one of the advantages that we bring is that acquired expertise and that skill set that I mentioned earlier. We've seen everything that could possibly go wrong. And as we go into each of these snowflakes, we're able to help these clients solve their current issues, which are typically tied, as I mentioned, to pest outbreak or underspecified mechanical, and then earn their trust and respect. Our scientists and experts earn that trust. So we're a trusted partner for then many facilities into the future. Also, I'll add in, as there's acquisitions and consolidation in the industry, typically an MSO will have facilities that have much different systems in them, different environmental control systems or mechanical or lighting. And so we're also working with the clients to help streamline or bring continuity to their groups of facilities, which helps them, of course, grow more efficiently, but it also allows them from a training standpoint. Cross-training is not as required, because as their teams go into different facilities, everything is the same. It's just the size that's a little bit different.
Got it. Bradley left me a really good peg to kind of jump into my next set of questions here on the consolidation front, right? Cannabis cultivators, plant touching companies who, most of the viewers of this would be familiar with, they have some difficulties in doing business in the US that ancillary companies don't. Maybe David, I could turn to you first. I mean, what are some of the ways that ancillary companies can access investors that maybe a plant touching company cannot right now in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, since we're not directly touching, we get, I get dozens of calls, sometimes a week, if not on a monthly basis. It's just a little bit more digestible. I actually still see, though, some hesitancy, even though it's not directly plant touching. I mean, I can talk to our direct experience. We had a great banking relationship with a big national bank when I took over, and within a year and a half, somebody over there found out that, what industry we were servicing, and they closed our line of credit. and close our accounts. So I got on the phone. I said, look, we're not touching the plant, this and that. And well, our stockholders, our shareholders, they don't want to be involved in that. So, I mean, generally, I agree with what you're saying. It's easier to access capital. It's easier to access the capital markets for sure if you're not touching the plant. But I still think there's a way to go. I was really shocked, and I know these other guys on the panel probably have their own horror stories about being treated just kind of out of the blue. But to the question you're asking, yeah, for us, it's a lot easier than for one of the big MSOs.
Right.
There's at any point in time, I could pick up the phone and call dozens of funds and banks that would be more than happy to provide the capital to help support growth here for sure. And I can't imagine what it's like trying to figure out where I'm going to get the next dollar as I'm scaling if I'm a big MSO. That in itself would be very, very challenging.
Yeah. Nick, I saw you smiling there when David was talking about some of the challenges. I'm wondering if you have dealt with similar issues, in your work.
Yeah, there's always challenges, right? I think that the banking system and the capital infrastructure for cannabis has substantially evolved since 2012 when we started, and hopefully we'll get this Safe Banking Act passed in rather short order, which will just be a tremendous catalyst for the industry. When you think about financing capital infrastructure, opening up that flow of money, so to speak, will be something that just blows the doors wide open for our companies and for the companies that want to build infrastructure. From a capital market standpoint, obviously we're seeing a lot of consolidation upstream with the MSOs, with these consolidations and acquisitions going on. And to expand on David's point, people are just kind of beating down our doors. We are going through a CB right now, which has been tremendously successful. And we've had a lot of outreach and a lot of positive momentum in that regard. We're always looking to open conversations with the right capital partners, of course. And, from our business standpoint, I think that, Precision is unique because we have this large competitive moat, right? So there's a few other players in our industry, but it's not as widespread and as fragmented as growing infrastructure. There's really a handful of players. So consolidation in our industry is going to be something that you're going to see in our particular segment, I should say. And I remain extremely bullish in the fact that, again, 50% of what people are consuming is from an extracted product. So when you look at the amount of infrastructure that needs to be created in order to produce those products for the consumers, it's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity.
Jeremy, I think that
go ahead.
Raymond and I both can attest to what I'm about to discuss. The first part, as it pertains to Urban Grow, working capital has always been our biggest challenge and our largest hurdle. We had great ideas. We saw market opportunities, but we weren't capitalized to go after those opportunities. And the money would flow to the plant touching companies much more rapidly than it would to an ancillary company at the time. But with the recent uplistings, Grow Generation led the way. Hydrofarm followed closely thereafter. And then with Agrify and Urban Grow raising substantial amounts of money this year and uplisting to the NASDAQ to be in a spotlight like the NASDAQ, I think that's really starting to change the industry and will help change that for companies behind us as well. And so what we've done at Urban Grow is started to look at how do we stay in the forefront? How do we, in terms of legalization, safe banking, et cetera, how do we give back to an industry that's treated us very well over the last 8 years, especially the last 6 months? So I joined the board of a bipartisan lobbying group focused on cannabis reform in America, discussing these very topics. It's the National Cannabis Roundtable. And David also sits on the board and is chair of one of their committees. But this helps us stay in the forefront, make sure not only our ancillary voice is heard, but also the ancillary industry in general in cannabis is heard as well. So we can help make it easier for others that follow.
Yeah. Raymond, if you could kind of walk us through that. I know Agrify was one of the first 3 or so ancillary companies to go public. It was, there's kind of a lot of excitement around the IPO. So if you could kind of talk to us about that, and without revealing too much about how the conversations with some of the bankers and investors went, as you were going public and some of the challenges there.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, we did have a very successful IPO earlier this year, and I think that we kind of surprised everybody with a very, very fast sort of follow-ons, like a few weeks immediately thereafter. And the reason why we did that is because I truly believe that we really need to have the strongest possible balance sheet to grow the business, right? And now we're sitting on $140 million of cash, and that's basically allows us to really just kind of drive this industry forward. We're working very closely with our customers by providing them with equipment financing, or even helping them with access to capital. And what actually we see is very interesting is that not only is equity financing available now, there are also very interesting other debt-like instruments that are becoming more and more available. And one of the reasons why a lot of the financing companies are very interested in working with Agrify is because of our standard modular system. Now, instead of basically, they know that if something goes wrong, right, these standard modular systems are movable. We were talking to, for example, one of the MSOs, and the reason why they're so attracted to our solution is because, as Bradley or David mentioned earlier, right now they have, every facility is built up differently, right? They're operating under different standard operating procedures, right? Then eventually, how do you consolidate? But by using our solution, it allows them, it's basically the same standardized modular system that they could just move all the boxes from 10 different facilities into one facility, and they would basically be able to run that, essentially overnight. So I think this is where, our solution is unique. And I really believe that standardization is probably going to be another main theme that the industry is looking forward in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jeremy,
go ahead, please. Yeah.
Part of urban-gro's uplisting, we had dozens of funds and family offices invest, and we had a tremendous number of roadshow presentations. And one of the themes that I heard over and over was the comfort level. Some I'd say more than half of the groups that invested had not invested in a plant-touching company before, but they were willing to dip their toe in the water and invest in an ancillary company. So that was really positive. Also, I saw an influx of groups come in from controlled environment ag, food-focused, non-cannabis groups that had been investing in that market, and they were willing to enter the cannabis market for the first time. So there is a wave of capital coming in from previously nervous groups.
Yeah. And to that point, Bradley, I don't want to spend too much time on this. We only have a few minutes left, but it's a theme we've seen creep into a little bit of the analyst commentary recently. It's that ancillary companies are a way to kind of bet on this broader theme of legalization without kind of playing in the whatever euphemism you want to use here, plant touching, heavily regulated space as of right now. So kind of with that, I want to close in the last few minutes here. There's a lot of movement on the legislative front. Obviously, you have all mentioned how much things like the Safe Banking Act or the MORE Act or any of these other pieces of legislation would help you guys and help your companies grow. So I'm curious, what do you expect to see in the next few months? Do you think that the Democrats will get it done, or do you think that Biden will have a bill legalizing marijuana on his desk before the midterms? Maybe Raymond, we can start with you, and I'll go around and get your thoughts.
I don't think it's going to be tomorrow, but I do believe that it's probably going to be within the next 5 to 7 years or so. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's obviously a lot of excitement here domestically, U.S. But actually, what's been very interesting is that we're seeing a lot of activities outside of the U.S. The international market it's about to explode as well, so obviously for us 2021 we're still focusing on just kind of domestic U.S. market, but I believe that there's also the next wave that is coming. The rest of the world, we're seeing deregulation happening in Europe, South Latin America, in places like Asia, like even China is talking about potentially moving in this direction. Like there's so much interesting activities beyond just kind of North America, and that's what really excites me the most.
And just quickly, Raymond, before I move on to Nick, what markets internationally are most exciting to you? You mentioned China, you mentioned the EU, but is there, what's the cherry on top, or what's the biggest prize here in your opinion?
We're definitely now actually in the early stage of engagement with actually customers in Europe, as well as in Asia. Places like, for example, Thailand, Australia are really kind of leading the way. They're being very, very aggressive. We're also seeing quite a bit of activities in South and Latin America as well. So, yeah, I think it's really kind of inquiries are coming in from all over, and everybody is sort of already seeing kind of success in here in the U.S. and in Canada, and they're pretty much ready for kind of the next wave of deregulation, and it's happening all over the world.
Yeah, awesome. Nick, please go next. I mean, what do you expect to see on the federal front? And anything else you want to add to the topic, states, whatever,
really,
as interesting.
I did expand on Raymond's points there. We're seeing the same thing, right? We're seeing need for processing infrastructure very heavily in the EU. The amount of leads and activity and web traffic coming in from the EU is astounding. You look at some of these numbers that BDS is publishing, $180 billion market by 2030. So you've got really just a huge opportunity for growth internationally. All the other geographic regions that Raymond mentioned, we're in the exact same boat, completely aligned there. From a federal legalization standpoint, it's hard to speculate exactly how it's going to play out and what's going to come of it. And we know that the government at any given moment throw a curveball. So it's extremely hard to speculate. I do think that we'll see the Safe Banking Act get passed rather rapidly, and the 280E reform and things like that, because, they want their money, right? We need this infrastructure in order for the IRS to facilitate a lot of this stuff, to really get the money flowing through the industry. They want the economic catalyst, and there's a lot of lobbying and a lot of power behind that. And I think that that's a great intermediary step. But again, it's extremely hard to speculate. The one thing that I would say is that as companies in the ancillary business start to diversify through different geographic regions and internationally, you obviously become less exposed just to the United States. And while we remain obviously extremely bullish on cannabis in the United States, the diversity through these different jurisdictions is great, right? Because who knows what's going to happen when we put CGMP regulations and how much infrastructure will need to be changed. Ultimately, it'll be good for our business, but these companies are going to have to adapt to up and coming regulations. And that's always something that you have to remain extremely vigilant as an ancillary services provider, ancillary equipment provider, is maintaining that consistency and compliance.
Great. We have about a minute left. So David, I'll go to you, and then Bradley, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I would echo what both Nick and Raymond said. We try not to speculate on what's going to happen and when. The U.S. political system is what it is. There are things that make a lot of sense here. You've got a very fast-growing industry. It's generating a lot of jobs. It's a lot of economic benefit. It would be really nice that the rules and regulations around that would be something that allowed the natural deployment of capital and the natural growth. But all that aside, we're expecting safe banking as well. I think it's going to make a little bit of a difference, but I'm with Raymond. I think we're years away from, monumental change in the United States, that like a floodgate type of thing. But I would also agree with them both on the rest of the world. For us right now, Europe is the biggest growth market that I see for my business, and we've invested heavily over the last 2 or 3 years for that. I would suspect that Brad's going to say something very close to that as well. We've got customers all over Europe and probably a dozen countries. We've got installations in Asia Pacific, Thailand, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. And we're very, very fortunate to be owned by a company big enough to deploy the capital, because if I had to go out into the markets right now and get that money to fuel that growth, it would have been impossible. Never mind getting capital just to grow your business in the United States, but to go far away and tell people, give me this money because I'm going to go, develop a return 4,000 or 5,000 miles away. But we're very bullish on Europe, very, very bullish. You got the totality of Europe is probably twice the population of the United States. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Patrick,
I'll
can we
close
go
it
to
off
Bradley
quickly.
Yeah.
I'll close it off quickly. I agree with all of the comments from the gentleman. I'm actually in Latin America in my hotel room right now presenting. I'm joining a team traveling to meet prospective and clients in Europe, starting in about a week for a 2-week period. There is a tremendous global demand for the knowledge base that has been garnered in the U.S. market, and with our experts, engineers, horticulturists, and the 300 facilities, Urban Grow's in a perfect position to provide that in the other countries around the world. So great opportunity for us all. It's just the start. I'm sure every CEO on here would say the same thing.
Awesome. Well, look, I appreciate it. We've hit our time. I appreciate you all coming prepared and answering answers with honesty. And I look forward to doing it again. Thanks a lot. And back to you, Patrick.
This has been great. Thank you all. I really appreciate it.